So Johan is our first guest. We have other very cool guests also on our lineup. You can check those on Meetup if you're interested. So Johan, can you quickly describe who you are and why you're sitting on this chair?
So my name is Johan Janssens. I'm a Belgian web developer. One of the things that I could probably take as street credit is that 12 years ago, co-founded a small CMS system called Joomla, which at that time was very nice and very hip to do. Today, CMS systems are so common that it's not something to really brag about anymore. But yeah, that's what I do.
Cool. So yeah, I met you I think 3 years ago or something, and you told me I'm one of the co-founders of Joomla. I was pretty impressed. So how did that actually happen? Like, I mean, it's not that you one day decide like I'm going to make a CMS system. Like, how did you roll into it, and yeah, how did you get there actually?
That goes back to 2004, 2003. I was working in Leuven for a youth festival, and we had to build a website. We wanted to have a website where we could put the program of the festival on, with the brochures that people could download, and maybe some information for the tickets and everything that was happening. So we wanted also something that we could update quite quickly, because a static website is a little bit harder to update quite quickly. So I started looking at different CMS systems or different systems that existed. And if you know a little bit about that era, you call back to the nukes and the post-nukes of the time. That's a system that I tested. There was the predecessor for WordPress that I tested. Drupal wasn't really there yet. I think Dries had just made Drop. And then I came past this system. Hypo 3 was there already from our German friends. And I came past this system called Mambo. And the cool thing about Mambo was that it was quite nice to work with. And the code was understandable. All the other stuff I was like, how does all this work? And I could get going with it quite quickly. So this is how I actually rolled into Mambo and started setting up that first website. And then step by step, you start finding problems and bugs, and there's this open source community that you can get into, which is nice, because for the first time you can actually help make something better. So you start submitting ideas and bug reports, and more you actually become sometimes a little pain, because you find all these problems and you go to all these developers, hey, we could do this and we could do that, and we could do it like that and like this. And so at some point, I think some of these guys found me so much of a nuisance that it was like, this guy, we could better get him in, because otherwise we need to listen all the time to all the ideas that he had. Actually, that's one of the very first developer of Mambo told me that. The reason that we got you in was because you were a big of a pain on the forums. So yeah, that's how it happened. And
cool.
Then a year later, Mambo forked into Joomla.
So you started Joomla of your own, or were you with a group of people?
We were with a group. We were initially 17.
Okay, 17. Wow. And so maybe it's not one of the questions, but it's interesting for me to understand, like, how did you collaborate in that time? Because there was no GitHub yet, there was no Bitbucket yet, so it was through mailing lists, or how did that work?
Mailing lists, the very good old real like.
And IRC, I guess. Yeah.
And IRC. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I remember those times.
MIRC.
Cool. So we're not going to talk too much about Joomla, because maybe, I mean, not everyone in the audience is interested in Joomla. But what interests me is maybe you know that I've been in the WordPress community for a while, and how did you experience the whole rivalry between the different CMS, like Joomla, WordPress, Drupal, and the others you named before? Like, there are some clear winners, some are losers. How did you experience all of that?
That has changed very drastically when the whole commercialization around all the CMS systems actually started happening. In the beginning, when we started with Mambo and Joomla, and we were talking to other PHP developers about the CMS systems that they were creating, because at that time, when everybody was fighting a little bit for attention, there were 150 different ones. And there were 3 that emerged as the top ones. But in the beginning, I met Dries regularly and talked about the Drupal work, was connected to the WordPress community, and we didn't really see each other as rivals. We were working on solving a problem, and everybody was doing that in his way. It's only later that people were seeing, this one is better, or I like that one better, and then the rivalry kind of starts.
Yeah, especially in the last years when a lot of money got thrown into these communities. Yeah. You really feel that there is like plugin makers also starting to voice themselves and stuff like that. So you also make your plugins yourself. So how did you experience that then?
Yeah, I think when the stakes get higher, and especially, it's interesting, right? When you're an open source developer, you come together with a group of people to solve a problem. And whatever that problem is, you try to solve that with like-minded people in the best way possible. When you try to sell that, market that solution, then that's where the rivalry can happen. Because then you need to compare it with something else. As long as you take the comparison out, here's a problem and here's a solution.
Yeah.
And with the extensions that we built extensions primarily for Joomla, so we're not necessarily into WordPress yet. However, that's going to change next year.
Cool.
So yeah, it's different though. You see the two systems from a technical perspective, and you see the differences. But then there's also for people that cannot look inside the box.
Yeah.
They just look at the box and they see what the box looks like. And this is where the rivalry then happens.
Cool, or not cool, it is
Well,
rivalry. So let's talk a bit about open source organizations in general. Like you were from the beginning with Joomla, and it scaled to what it is today. Like how did you experience this whole, I don't know how many years it is, but it's a long while, 12 years now. So how did you experience the scaling up from like a 17-person team to like a big open source organization?
Well, so in our case, it kind of happened in a very specific way, right? Joomla was a fork. So if you know what a fork is, you take one system and basically a group of people goes one way and the other group goes the other. So there was already a substantial community there when we forked. There's a whole reason why that happened. I'll leave that out of it. But so at the point of fork, you have two groups which are kind of equal. And there's already rivalry between the two groups because one group wants to prove that they're doing stuff better than the other to take the community with them in their direction. So that was a very, very hard time. I remember the first couple of weeks and the first couple of months were very, very stressful. I think those 17 people, or the larger of those people, were working 12, 14 hours on Joomla alone. Because you were basically starting from nothing at all. There was code, and that was it. We didn't have a website, we didn't have a server, we didn't have money, we didn't have people, we didn't have community, we didn't have anything, and we had to build it all from there. That took 6 months to a year and a half before we were getting settled. I still remember going to my first events, paying my own bills. So
yeah.
We had to ask people in the community, do you want to sponsor my plane ticket? To promote Joomla at an event in San Francisco because we want to go there. So that was an interesting but very challenging time.
I can imagine. So you explained like people were working like 12, 14 hours on Joomla, not getting paid for it. What actually drives you to contribute to open source?
At that time, the challenge and the experience.
And today? Do you still contribute?
Yeah, I still write a lot of, like 90%, well, 80% of what the code that we build is public.
Okay.
All the code that we build is licensed under an open source license.
Cool.
If we have customers that don't want us to license the code under an open source license, we choose another customer.
Okay, makes sense.
So a lot.
Okay. So Timble is also a remote company. What are the challenges and the benefits that you experience with working remotely?
Challenges, time zones.
Time zones, yeah, for sure.
Time zones are interesting.
How many time zones do you have? No?
We go from Vancouver, Canada to Manila, Philippines.
Oh.
So
it's like 24 hours that you have people available,
almost.
Right? Yeah.
We could.
Cool.
If we wanted to.
Yeah.
So that's challenging. That's an interesting challenge. It's also very hard to bring all those people together at one point at one place because flying them all in is quite expensive. So that's
we know that.
that's a challenge. What else is challenging? Culture is challenging. Somebody from Canada has different working methods or different working methodologies than somebody from the Philippines. Language might be a problem, but we solve that quite well. Everybody speaks very well English. Benefits? No office. No office is cool.
Yeah, we would love to have no office either.
I can open up my door in the morning and just have the shortest commute. I just across the hall and then just enter the office. I can start working.
But you do have an office then? Is it in your house or?
Yeah,
okay.
in my house.
Okay, cool. So I remember like that you were working when you were doing Joomla work with Timbo. You were also making the websites for the the police, the local police departments, right? Like a platform thingy. And yeah, I remember you had a funny anecdote about the police and the server. And
yeah, we have a couple, but yes.
Can you share them? It's pretty funny.
So very short, right? Most of the Belgian police is divided in 190 police zones. There's departments, or like, let's call them small companies. They manage a specific area in Belgium, and they all have their own website. So originally they all had their own different website using different systems, until somebody in the Belgian police said, hey, it would be cool if we all could use the same system and the same look and feel, and we could at least try to make those sites look similar. And they set initially on Joomla, and that ran for 2-3 years. That person basically did that in his spare time, setting up the server, maintaining it, until we got in, and we took it from there. We built a multi-site platform for 150 police zones. We did a lot more with the technology. Actually, eventually migrated it off Joomla for most of it, because it's not necessarily running Joomla anymore. But in the beginning, before we got in, well, I think, yeah, just before we got in, the sites got hacked. Alarm. There's some sort of Turkish message or Russian message, which is like crazy red thing on all the police sites. And if that happens, then all the alarm bells start ringing, and before you know it, you're in national news and your newspapers, and reporters start calling. So that was a small problem. Now, if you get hacked, what do? You pick up the phone and you call tech support. All right, that's a problem. We don't even really know where tech support is. Oh yeah, hosting company. Oh shit, that hosting company doesn't exist anymore, where we originally bought that dedicated server. They've been bought by Combel. Oh, no problem. We call Combel. Hello Combel. Our server is hacked. All our sites are a little reddish. We need this thing turned off immediately. Oh yeah, that's the server of that company that we bought a while ago. We have one problem. We have no idea where that server is. Oh, yeah, I see that. But it needs to be taken offline immediately. Yeah, that's a problem. We don't know in which rack it is. We don't even know in which data warehouse it is, well, let alone how to get there. So what did they do? They traced the server using their criminal team. They went to a judge. They got a search warrant. They set themselves in 2 combis, and they drove to the actual data warehouse. Because a data warehouse, you cannot just get in, right? It's a quite secure environment. It's not just getting in. You don't go in and say, I come to collect my server. But that's what they did. Search warrant, data warehouse. Hello, we're here. Where are you coming from? Oh, we're coming to collect our server. Here is the search warrant. Can you please take us to the rack so that we can screw it out and take it with us? Because they wanted to investigate what had gone wrong. So they screwed it out, and then they drove back to Combel. And they said, like, they entered in Combel, and they went to the front desk, and they were like, oh, can we talk to tech support? For what? Well, here, this is our server. Now, can you please fix it? So that's a story.
Yeah, I think it's really funny.
And it's really true. Like, eventually, they fixed it, and everything went back online. The reason that it was hacked was not because it was running Joomla, but it was because the server and the software on the server was not updated.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, cool. While we were preparing this session, you also told me that you're currently diving into blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Where do you think we are with this? It's like in the recent months, a lot of things have been happening. You said you started following it recently, so are you new to it, or have you been following it already for a while? Or
I've been following crypto a bit for the last 2-3 years. I've been actively trading for 6-7 months now.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how do you look back to the last like 6 months, I would say?
Yeah, it was a very wild ride. Oh my god. Yeah, I got into crypto with the idea I want to learn more and understand more of how that works. I was already, like a couple of years ago, I actually wanted to get into trading, forex trading. I wanted to learn how trading works. How can you trade stock? But it's quite expensive, so you get a license and to get into forex trading. And with crypto, it's much easier accessible. So in, I think it was July, August, I got into my first coins, started buying my first coins and trying to understand how all that works. And that was just right before the first Bitcoin crash of, the second Bitcoin crash of 2017, or correction of 2017. So I came in at a very wrong time. So I learned a lot at that point. We're in the middle of the first one of 2018 right now, because it's correcting right now. But yeah, it's an interesting time. It's like, it reminded me a lot about 10, 12 years ago about CMS systems, and how there were 150 CMS systems and everybody was like trying to grasp attention, and they were better, and there was so much buzz going on. And you see the same thing happening in crypto right now. There's so much buzz, there's new coins coming out.
ICOs all the time.
Every week, ICOs every week. There's good news, there's bad news, there's FUD, there's fuss, there's so much happening.
Okay. Are you in it for the money or for the technology?
Well, the thing is that there was this nice quote today on one of the forums that I followed. There was a guy, so they were saying, yeah, I'm now a crypto millionaire, and he was like, yeah, I lost 30%. I started with like 10 million, and I have like a couple of million left now. So yeah, that's the thing, right? If you start getting into crypto and you want to learn about trading, you're going to lose money from the beginning. So you don't get in with the idea that I'm going to be instantly rich. There are too many people already trying to do that. And you see those horribly failing. They might come in at a time when the market is going up, and they might get lucky, but luck doesn't last. It's only when you start understanding the basics. So the crypto part, I'm in to learn and hopefully make a little bit of money at the end. Yeah, that's at least the idea. I could put my money on the bank, or I could try to do that, hopefully. But besides that, blockchain is very interesting. How blockchain works, what blockchain can do, the problem that blockchain solves, and how it solves that is very interesting to learn about.
I know how it works, yeah.
Do you know how it works?
The people I met in love should know it. So
you do?
They got a presentation.
The Byzantine generals dilemma? Do you know that?
Probably not. If they don't nod yes.
Shall I like in 3 minutes? This is a very nice.
Good. Go for it.
So blockchain solves a problem that we have been trying to solve on the internet for decades already. How can you transport value from A to B without a central middleman? How can you do that decentralized? And we have never been able to solve that problem. That specific problem is defined as the Byzantine dilemma, or the Byzantine general's dilemma, or the Byzantine problem. And it's actually quite simple. Imagine that you are a big army, and this is how the dilemma is defined. You're a big army, and you want to take this city called Byzantium. And the army is divided into 9 sections, and has 9 generals. The 9 generals are across the city. Right? They're all in their own section. They cannot communicate with each other directly. They cannot see each other because they're in little valleys, and they need to attack simultaneously. If they don't do that, they will fail. How can you communicate amongst those 9 generals so that each general knows the exact moment and time to attack? Taking into account that the generals cannot talk to each other, and some of these generals might actually be traitors and try to put you off, right? Because imagine that you're a general and you sent me a message. Like, the message that you sent me, is that authentic? Did you send it, or was it intercepted in between? And is that message actually the message that you want to give me, or the opposite message of what I should do? If you say attack, and I could go, but he might actually mean they're at the opposite. How can I know that? Right? That's a big problem. So how can you make sure that those 9 generals, without being able to connect with each other, will attack at the same time? Byzantine problem. Blockchain solves that. Without going into technology, in the actual technology, how it does that to a proof of work system, and there's a lot of complexity behind it, and a lot of crypto technology to solve that problem. But that's what blockchain does. It basically sends messages around, and we can be 100% sure that those messages are authentic, they're coming, they're not tampered with. And so we can move value from A to B in blockchain without having a central authority that controls the whole process. That's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I like it as well. It's like Dimitri actually gave a presentation on our retreats about the blockchain, and before that I was like, I knew what it kind of was, but I would never looked into the technology, and the technology is really, I mean, it's really big. I also believe there is a lot of things that could be done with it. You're a programmer yourself, so when you trade Bitcoin, do you like program it, or do you just still do it manually?
Yeah, I'm not there yet. Like the first thing is you actually need to learn the rules before you can actually program something that might try to automate it. That would be ideal, right? That we could actually program.
That was the first thing I thought to do. Like
how can we program a crypto bot that just trades for me? And
like they put like a minimum price, a maximum price, and like.
Yeah, there are a couple of bots around, but I haven't seen anything that is really successful yet. Cool. But yeah, we that would be ideal. I first need to learn a little bit more about the rules, so I'm doing it manually.
Cool. Yeah, one last question. One question we're going to ask all the interviewees. If you compare the world today with 10 years ago when Maybe12 was founded, what do you think is the biggest difference? So that's 2008, right?
Just one difference?
I mean, the biggest.
The biggest.
Or two biggest, I don't know.
The biggest difference. I think, there are so many differences. 12 years ago, I bought my first iPhone in 2007. That's 11 years ago. Today, my iPhone is as powerful as 100 times, 1,000 times more powerful than the first computer, which I bought 25 years ago, which is the Commodore 64. So I think the biggest difference is the realization that the world actually evolves exponentially, that technology evolves exponentially, that what was the step we made from 10 years ago to today is going to happen in the next 3 years, and then the next year, and it's only going to go faster and faster and faster.
So that you come to my following up question: where do you think the world will be in like 10 years?
I need this glass wall for that.
No, but I mean, like, how would you like to see it?
Imagine, right? If you take the path of technology evolution into account and the fact that it's exponential, if you see new technologies emerging like blockchain, which are going to be able to change a lot. There's artificial intelligence, which is going to be able to change a lot. There is a lot of maturing technology. If you combine all that together, I think we are going to see a large change. I think that maybe one of the bigger changes, or the bigger changes that we will see, is that the computer as we know it will disappear. Our environment will start reacting and understanding us. Right now, we still need to interface with something. We need to interface with a screen. We need to interface with a computer. When you take artificial intelligence and you take computers that become part of your environment, they become part of what you use and where you are, and they start reacting on you without you even controlling them because they understand what you want at that point, then our environment will become responsive to us. That would be very interesting, because then it responds back. We don't need to tell it what to do anymore. It basically takes.
So know what we want, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that was the first part of the interview where I was asking the questions. So if there are any questions from the audience, it's the moment to ask them. We're going to ask you to use a microphone so that the people that are watching the live stream can also listen in. And we also have Jonas sitting there. Maybe there is questions from the live stream, I don't know. He's with a delay, so. It's true.
You guys are.
Any questions?
So where does the name Joomla come from?
Ah, that's an interesting one. That took 2 weeks to decide. The most awful 2 weeks of my life. Or interesting or awful, depending on how you look at it. So the first thing you have to do is come up with a name. And then you start thinking about, okay, it needs to be a cool name. And people are starting to put suggestions forward. So we had this whole list of suggestions. And we had 17 people around the world trying to come up with a name spread over multiple time zones. So people were discussing, and then other people were discussing. And eventually we were looking at Mozilla, which used interesting naming schemes. We were looking at different languages. We had 3 names eventually. Joomla with a U, which comes from the word Swahili and means altogether or as a whole. Somebody also suggested Zagreus, which is on the list. And then the third one, Yaya or something, I don't remember the third one. Anyway, we did a little bit of name testing with a test audience, and the test audience found that the name Zagreus sounded like a sinking Russian submarine. So that was a bad idea. So we didn't choose that one. Well, I think most people were inclined to use the word Joomla. However, in the beginning, everybody was going, Joomla, it sounds, somebody said like, it sounds a little bit like poop. I still remember, it's Joomla. But we didn't really have much other alternatives and not so much other time. So what we did was we took the word Joomla, which has an U, we made a double O out of it, and we put an exclamation mark behind it, which later...
Like Yahoo, right?
Yeah, like Yahoo at that time, you know. It sounded like it's an open sounding, funny name. And the cool thing is that because it comes from Swahili and it means all together there, it has about the same connotation, the same meaning in most languages. Besides some Arabic languages, I think, where it means beer, which is also good, because everything in open source works if you give a developer a beer or a pizza. So yeah, this is where the name comes from. It comes from the Swahili word Joomla.
Any other questions?
First and foremost, it was a very interesting interview. Thank you for that. I have a question regarding crypto and blockchain. So I'm not following it too closely, but you see a lot on Reddit, Twitter, etc. There are many sources where you can read about crypto. A lot of people are into it for the money. Some people are real believers in blockchain. What for you are like valid sources of learning more about crypto and blockchain, especially because everyone is talking about it these days?
There's a great book, forgot the title, I just bought it. There are a couple of good books. I think there's so much information out there right now, and there's so much being published that it becomes very hard to filter what are the right sources and what are like the lesser sources. I think right now I'm going for the people that have been in the space for 7-8 years, that are in there from the beginning, which are the people that followed it from the start. And I try to read up on them and not about all the hype and all the fuss and that is being thrown out, because there's too much information right now. So a couple of good books, and the book that I'm reading about trading is they call it the Trading Bible. There's a book that talks about trading, but that book goes for forex trading or crypto trading, so there's not really a difference there. If you want to follow crypto, I think the same thing was true for CMS systems in the beginning and web development in the beginning. If you want to follow it, try to not follow it too much on Reddit and all those sources, because there's so much information and disinformation out there. Try to find the real authorities, read up on those.
Hacker News.
Hacker News, and there's so much stuff there. So that's what I try to do, because otherwise you get blindsided by all the over information that is out there.
Thank you. Cool.
You're welcome.
More questions? No? Okay.
Do you have any advice to do business with open source technologies?
Which open source technologies?
Just in general.
In general.
If you want to build a business around open source technologies, for example, do you have any? What did you learn from Joomla?
Wow, that's another presentation as a whole. So doing open source, doing business with open source is hard or harder. Why? Because so open source is two things, right? Open source is basically a way to give something to people that is copyless, so there's no copyright anymore, and they can do whatever they want with that. That's what open source philosophy-wise does. At the other end, you also need to find a way to make money with it, because you're starting a company around open source and around free software. So if I'm giving it away for free, then where is the money going to come from to pay the people that actually build it? You know, that's that dilemma that you're constantly in. So if you're starting with open source technologies and building open source technologies, then your business model is going to be less conventional, and the people that can advise you in that there are going to be less people out there that can do that. And the people that can advise you legally are also going to be less. You cannot simply go to any lawyer and say, okay, I need a licensing agreement, and this thing is going to be licensed under this open source license. And then he's going to go like, no idea. And we've seen that with many of our clients. So you need to find the right experts to help you. You need to think very well around the business modeling, what you're going to do with open source and why you're going to do open source software. Like, how does that fit in your mindset? Like, why does it need to be open source?
Thanks. Cool. We have one question from the internet. Two questions.
Two.
From Nick.
So we have a question straight from Brazil.
Wow.
Some of your colleagues. We would like to know what the biggest technical challenge was in building and scaling Joomla.
The biggest technical challenge. Wow. I think that's a hard one. The biggest technical challenge. There are two. Well, I think there are two. One, when we started, PHP was not the PHP that we know today. We're talking about PHP 4-ish, 4.2, 4.3. So that was it was quite hard to work with PHP at that time because it didn't do really what you wanted it to do. That was one, and two, keeping it simple enough. Because you're building a system that a lot of other people are also going to use. That's from the end user perspective, but also going to build upon. That's from the developer perspective. And if you build something that is technically complex with a lot of programming patterns, a lot of complexity behind it, there's only going to be so few developers that are going to really get what you want there. And that's going to fight against them. So you need to keep your code simple. And that's hard, right? Because you're in this community and you're discussing this, and the guys that know what it is about are going to say, hey, why is this so done so simply, right? We could do this programming
So ugly,
pattern.
right?
So ugly, and we could do it like that, and it could be cool, and we could link it this and that way, and you go, yeah. But then you and I understand it, and nobody else understands it anymore.
Isn't backwards compatibility also a big challenge?
Well, we failed on that.
Okay, that's easy, right? That's easy. I know it was a big thing in the WordPress community. Like
WordPress did very well on that. It's an interesting discussion, right? So how far does your backwards compatibility go? Is it one version, which is Drupal, at least until Drupal 8 came? They were not backwards compatible at all. It was a choice, and the community accepted that. Is it all versions back, which is WordPress? In WordPress, you could go a lot of versions back, almost all versions back.
with most of things, yes.
Yeah. In Joomla, we took a middle ground. It was 2-3 versions back, but not more. So at some point, we wanted to break certain things and then communicate that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think. Because in WordPress, you're restricted by a lot of the backwards compatibility things.
Yeah.
Cool. What was another question from?
Yeah, I have another question here. So the question was, you're still actively developing right now. Are you planning on staying a developer for the rest of your life on doing this? Is this a passion that you plan on
With my sticker.
Not like me, right?
the rest of your working life, that is?
Well, I hope I can work until, but yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's a good one, right? So the thing is that I would actually like to develop even more. There have been, like in the beginning, I programmed like 12, 14 hours a day easily. Right now, when you're trying to start running a business, there's a lot more that you need to do. You need to do a little bit of coaching and mentoring. You need to work with your clients. There's a lot of other things that you're involved in. So I'm actually programming less than I would like to. But yeah, I would like to continue programming simply because I don't want to get into a situation where one of my developers tells me, yeah, we're going to do it like that. And then I go like, I have no idea if this is actually the right way to do it, yes or no, and if we could do it different. Right? That doesn't mean that I need to be able to do it better than him, because this is why I hire these guys. They need to be better than me, but I still want to at least be able to make that difference, right? Are we making the right choice here, yes or no? And for that, I need to be.
How do you do that? I struggle with the same thing. Like for me, it's extremely hard with like my days are full of meetings and I don't have the time almost to program. I give myself or try to give myself our Friday, which is like our Friday afternoon that we use for doing fun stuff. Like last week I did my first machine learning experiment, which was interesting. But I feel like a hacker typer most of the time, like just copy pasting and trying to do things. And our guys can agree on that, I guess. But how do you make sure that you manage to still program, but also make sure that your business runs as a train?
Yeah, so in Timble, the programming that I do in Timble is we have our own framework. So we have our own, we don't use Symfony or we don't use any PHP frameworks. I built my own. I've been working on that for the past 10 years now. I started it 10 years ago. And that's what I do. I develop the framework. So this is basically when we see repetitive problems happening, we combine them and we build components for them that are built on the framework, and that core framework, that core architecture is what I built. And this is where we built everything on. So that's basically my work, and that's a combination of coding, reading a lot of other code actually. I read a lot of other code from other frameworks. I just start browsing through Symfony code, even Java code, Ruby code, different frameworks to understand how they're solving the same problems, but what are the naming conventions they use, what are the approaches they use, how do they do something, and seeing where the web community and web development overall is going and how we can implement that. So that's
Cool.
how I try to keep on edge, which is still hard. But
Yeah, I can imagine. Cool. Any other questions? No? So yes, one?
That was the mic word.
All right, so I have a question about open source, which you probably have some experience with. What are some of the disadvantages of going open source software?
So there are many. So first of all, when you build something, so the basic idea behind open source is that knowledge should be freely available. Right? That's the Stallman idea. And actually brings us back to why I like crypto and blockchain so much, because the idea of Stallman that knowledge should be freely available, combined with the work that has been done on the internet, and you have one of the founders here soon, that actually makes blockchain happen. So it's both open source, because blockchain and crypto technologies are open source, in combination with the network effect that actually combines where we are. Anyway, open source. So open source means the knowledge needs to be freely available. So we're going to license it in such a way that everybody can use it, study it, change it, and give it to somebody else. Right. Now, just building that is no problem. That's actually great, because if I build it and put it out there, somebody else sees a problem with it and can contribute back and make a change to that. That's awesome, because then we're all collaborating together. The problem starts, or the challenge starts, when you want to try to make money from that. Because then all the conventional models that exist today, that exist in most companies, fail. How are you going to make money from something that is actually freely available to everybody? And where is that very thin line? And there it gets blurry. And it gets mostly blurry because people don't understand it enough. That is because most lawyers don't understand it enough. Most business people don't understand it enough. The market simply doesn't have enough experience with open source and open source business solutions to understand it enough. In Joomla, speaking from Joomla, and we see that every day, we see a lot of our customers saying, hey, but I should just pay for support, right? That's all I need to pay for. And that could be a business model. There could be a company that just sells support. We don't do that. We sell a little bit more. We have additional services. So it's not because I have given you a copy of the software that the next copy of the software, which includes a change, is also free for you. You can still need to pay to be able to download that. You're not paying for the software, but you're paying to be able to download it. But that's hard to explain. I have a version already. You made a new version, and that version includes a fix for a problem that I have. And now you're basically telling me that to be able to download that new version that has a fix for a problem that I have, I need to pay. Yeah. See the tricky part? But what if I stop paying? Can I continue using it? Yeah, you can. And if you then do a new version that includes a fix, then I need to pay to get that. Yeah, you do, because that doesn't mean because you got it there that you can get all the other versions too. So those are all problems that people deal with. I have 10 sites. I have installed it on 10 sites. I have a problem with one of those sites. Yeah, but you still need to pay to get support for all 10. We're not just going to wait until you have a problem with one of the 10. You need to pay a fee, which is not as much as per site, but you still need to do that so that you can get support. If you go to a hosting company, you're not paying the moment you need support. You're paying the moment you get in. So those are all challenges that people deal with, because they go like, but this should be free. Why do I need to pay for that? See the problem?
I also have maybe a follow-up question on that. Like, I think it was last week there was an article on Medium about a guy that made an NPM changed into an NPM package that's used in a lot of projects, where he was like scraping credit card numbers. I guess you read the blog post, and how do you think that we as developers are a bit too vague or not secure enough about using open source software, because we just include a lot of packages and just deploy it, and there is a lot of danger in that as well. Are we a bit too easy with that, or?
I think some of us are.
Yeah.
At least we don't try to be. You know, that this is, again, a challenge. A customer comes to you and says, I want to do a project with you, and you guys do everything using open source software, right? Yeah, and the reason you do that is because it's cheaper. There's no licensing fees. That's true. So we will do this project for you. But we cannot just go out there and use anything and everything that is out there. We need to vet that code first. We need to at least check it. We need to audit it a little bit, and then we will start using it. There is a cost involved with that. It's not because you're not going to pay a license fee that we don't need to do that. Some don't. Right?
Yeah, but still, even if you've checked it, and if you are using, for example, NPM, where you set a certain version, but not like the very specific version.
Yeah.
So someone implements something in a minor fix, and you still pull it in your deploy process.
Yeah, we are basically trusting that all of us developers are using the same ethical code, right? That all the code that we write is good code by definition.
I guess that like NSA and the Russians, they're putting stuff in open source packages without us knowing it, right? I mean, probably all the websites we make have somewhere a loophole in it where they can
It could be. Actually,
that's what I think, right?
Now that you mentioned on this, maybe you just defined an interesting blockchain problem.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, if you could define that in blockchain. Yeah.
With blockchain we could actually build a distribution mechanism where we could.
So we have a new project. Yeah, nice.
There you go.
We have one more question from.
The question sort of ties in with what you were discussing right now. It's another question from Brazil. Like, is it okay for like big money projects, for big money customers, to rely for 100% on open source packages? Because there's like a lot of these bigger companies, they want you to have like a vendor backing you, or because of the dangers involved in not having that.
What time is it in Brazil, by the way?
It's currently
they're 5 hours
afternoon.
behind.
Yeah, it's afternoon.
I mean, they're in the east coast of Brazil, so
Still okay.
yeah.
Hi, Brazil. So I think it's okay as long as the big company is aware of that. It's not because you're using open source that it's not vendor backed. There's a lot of vendor backed open source software. There's a lot of companies building free open source software where there might be a community edition, and there also might be an enterprise edition. And the community edition you can just download for free, and there is no warranties. The enterprise edition is actually the same software, but it comes with warranties. So there the company is basically going to say, you're going to pay, but you're basically going to pay for the support and the warranties that you're getting from us. So that model definitely works. Like a lot of like the CouchDBs and like a lot of the databases use
Elastic,
that model. Yeah. Elastic does that model. MySQL in a way use that model. MariaDB and all of those guys do that. So yeah, I don't think there is a danger in it, but you need to be due diligent in the way that you approach your packages, and of course that you work with your customer and making sure that if you use technology you don't understand 100% yourself. Like if it's all PHP and you're a PHP company, no problem. Mm-hmm. But the moment you start bringing in other packages, making sure that you have a connection with a vendor that can support you there. If something goes wrong there is somebody to fall back on. At least that's what we try to do.
Cool. More questions? Cool. Then I think we're good for now.
Good.
So thanks, Jan, for being here.
Thanks for the question.
No worries. So maybe to mention, our next heartbeats will also be in Ghent, because we'll be going to shift a bit between Ghent and Leuven, but probably the ones in the summer will be in Leuven. Our next guest is Thijs Nix, who is a product manager at Uber. Pretty interesting. He's coming over from Amsterdam. So I think it's I don't know the date. We'll put it on Meetup. Cool. Thanks all for coming, and we have some beers and other drinks, of course, and some chips. So enjoy. Thanks.
Bye, Brazil. 5 hours. Yeah, they're earlier, so it's earlier there.